It's an interesting move for sure. I am in the same boat as I think a lot of people that I expected if Urban came back, it would be at a top program. USC was a name that kept getting thrown out there that to me made a lot of sense. He hadn't coached out west, but he obviously has a lot of recruiting success out there, especially at Ohio State, and that's a program that you could see a guy like that coming in and changing things quickly. Obviously, the tradition and, like I said, the recruiting out there. Something, a program like that, Texas had also been thrown out there, and some others, but nothing came from that. And on Thursday, he accepted the job for the Jaguars and the NFL. I think it's going to be an interesting challenge. We've never seen him do this before. We've seen other coaches go from the college ranks to the professional level, and there's been mixed results. You can kind of pick and choose whichever side you want to do. Nick Saban's probably the biggest example of a guy who went there and been successful at the college level and failed. Jimmy Johnson with the Cowboys obviously did really well after his success with Miami. So, I think it's going to be about how Coach Meyer handles things. He said on the press conference today, he's going to keep very close watch on his health. And he's also not going to, try and micromanage things as much as he did when he was a college coach. And especially during his time at Florida, that he plans on hiring a staff that can do a lot of the stuff for him. And he'll be kind of more the guy overseeing things, which is easier said than done when you're Urban Meyer. He can certainly say that now, and I'll be interested to see how that goes. He said similar things when he came to Ohio State, and he did scale back to some degree, but it's hard when you're a self-admitted control freak to let other people handle things. And I think he's run into that throughout his career. The other big thing with the NFL, I think, is he's got to get used to losing. As weird as that sounds, at Ohio State, he lost 9 games in 7 years. And I know this has been thrown out a lot, but he could lose 9 games easily next year in Jacksonville. They went 1-15 this past season. Obviously, the pressure of winning is a little different in the NFL, where losing 3, 4, 5 games is acceptable. You still can make the playoffs and win a Super Bowl. That's not true in college football. And so you think the pressure's off a little bit, but Urban Meyer is wound tight in terms of winning football games. And, I've experienced it firsthand, the disappointment and just kind of all consuming feeling of loss that he has after defeats. So that's something he's definitely going to have to adjust to. And obviously then, we could talk about how his offense is going to translate and things like that. But, I think that's stuff that we'll learn down the road once he has a chance to kind of get a team together and you kind of see the pieces and the staff.
Yeah, because of the health issues and because of how losing affects him, it's impossible to answer right now whether his body and mind will be able to process. Well, I will say that his mind definitely processes and knows what success in the NFL looks like versus in college football. Again, you don't have to go 11-1. As you mentioned, there are teams that have lost 5 and 6 games and won a Super Bowl. So I'm sure his mind, of course, knows that, but whether that's all going to process when he hits the field in week 1, and probably is about an 80% certainty that he's going to start losing games right out of the gate, because it's going to be a difficult climb, and whether he's able to process fully his body as well as to whether, this is important, but the success rate and the expectation is much different. And that's going to be quite, the adjustment that he's going to have to make. Recruiting has always been something that he has been a master at. It's something that grinds down a lot of college coaches and why they would prefer to work with the next level. For Urban Meyer, though, that's been his linchpin in regards to one of his chief components to his success at Ohio State and in the college game. And now he goes to a situation where I'm sure he's going to have some input into personnel, but that's somewhat done for him.
It sounded like today, the press conference they had was not only with Urban Meyer, but with the owner of the Jaguars. And it sounded like, that they want to build this around Urban Meyer. So, obviously there will be a general manager brought in, but I imagine it will be someone who has similar views, maybe even that Urban Meyer, helps kind of select It sounds to me that he will be involved in a lot of the player comings and goings decisions. He was already talking today about that number one draft pick and the top quarterbacks in the draft. And, I think almost everyone assumes that they will take Trevor Lawrence. The Urban Meyer hiring does, present an interesting wrinkle, is obviously he has connections to Ohio State and knows a lot about Justin Fields. Justin Fields yet to actually declare for the draft, but that is the expectation. So I think he'll still have that involvement in player personnel decisions, but it certainly won't be the same. You can't just go out each year and bring in 25 new guys that were the best players in college football. I mean, it's done through the draft. It's done through free agency. You've got to work within a salary cap now, not just scholarship limits. So there's certainly a lot of things that are different. On the flip side of that, and maybe towards his health and mental well-being, he doesn't have to recruit 365 days a year. Once the season's over, there's time to, have a little bit of a break. The NFL is always ongoing, but you don't have that constant need to recruit and be on top of kids and things like that you do at the college level. So kind of some give and take there for him. But, I think like I said, he'll be involved with player personnel. It's just going to have to be done in a very different way. And that's why I think you need a general manager who's been through it before, but also sees the game similarly to Urban Meyer.
Even though Urban Meyer's known as an offensive innovator at Utah in particular, and then the way he was able to build that, it just seems as though the game has progressed so much that everybody pretty much knows what everybody else knows at this point until the next big wave happens. You look at Chip Kelly, and certainly Urban Meyer's career eclipses his considerably, but for a 4 or 5 year spurt, what he did at Oregon was cutting edge, ahead of the wave, ahead of the curve. And then he goes to the NFL, has a little bit of success, but ultimately fails there and seems to be outdated. So I would think where Urban Meyer is known for an innovative offense, he's hired more and given this much of cachet at that next level, more from being a leader of men, understanding organizations, inspiring, doing all those things, knowing psychology of how to lead people, all those things more so than the nuts and bolts and X's and O's.
I agree. And I think that's why the hirings he's going to make, whenever they happen, especially that offensive and defensive coordinator is going to be very interesting to see. He talked about today that, when they had a guy like JT Barrett, it was a lot of quarterback run. They were also under Tom Herman for a decent chunk of that time. And then you flip eventually to Ryan Day. You have Dwayne Haskins. You run more of not a pro style offense, but more of those concepts where you're not running the quarterback nearly as much. So, depending on the quarterback, depending on the weapons he has, depending on the offensive coordinator, I think that offense will change. I do think that being more of that motivational type guy that you mentioned will be important. But it's how you do it. He even on today's press conference, he was saying some of the same things, 4 to 6, A to B, some of these sayings he has that were always big, both at Florida and at Ohio State. But I think it's a little bit different motivating college players on scholarship looking to get to the NFL than it is $1 million athletes that, some of them will be making more money than Urban Meyer, that are doing this as a job, have already made it to the top of their sport. Obviously you want to win and you want to win a Super Bowl and all of those things. But, the motivation, the way he goes about it, I think will have to be a little bit different. And I'm interested to see how expressions like 4 to 6, A to B, the grind that he had at Ohio, things like that. Does that work on an NFL player the same way it did on guys in college? And I know he said today he talked to several of his former players that are in the NFL or have been in the NFL to kind of get their feel on certain things. So it sounds like he's really done his homework. I would expect nothing less. I don't expect him to dive into something like this and put himself out there if he doesn't think that there are ways he can succeed. So, I think this is a calculated risk, I guess, on his part.
Yeah, you would think that there would be very few college coaches in our lifetime that could step right into the NFL with no head coaching or any experience in the NFL whatsoever and have credibility in the locker room, but he would figure to be one of the few.